Imagine standing on the shores of Manhattan Island 5 centuries ago. No towering skyscrapers pierce the sky, no yellow taxis honk through busy streets, no millions of souls call this place home. Instead, ancient oak and chestnut forests stretch endlessly, their canopies reflecting in pristine waters where whales once breached within sight of what would become Wall Street. This is the story of how a collection of islands inhabited by indigenous peoples became the beating heart of the modern world. Long before European eyes gazed upon these shores, the Lenape people thrived here for thousands of years. They called this land Mannahatta, meaning island of many hills. Picture them navigating the crystal-clear waters in birch-bark canoes, harvesting oysters the size of dinner plates from beds that stretched for miles, hunting deer through forests so thick that sunlight barely touched the forest floor. The Lenape had created a sustainable paradise, living in harmony with nature's abundance. Their settlements dotted the landscape like pearls, connected by well-worn trails that would later become the foundation for Broadway and other major thoroughfares. The year 1524 brought the first European to these waters. Giovanni da Verrazzano, sailing under the French flag, described the harbor as a very agreeable situation located within two small prominent hills. But it would be another century before Europeans would truly grasp the treasure they had stumbled upon. In 1609, Henry Hudson, an English explorer sailing for the Dutch East India Company, navigated his ship, the Half Moon, up the river that would bear his name. Hudson was searching for the Northwest Passage to Asia, but instead discovered something far more valuable. A natural harbor so perfect it seemed designed by divine providence for commerce. The Dutch recognized opportunity when they saw it. Within 15 years, they had established New Amsterdam on the southern tip of Manhattan, creating what would become America's first melting pot. Picture New Amsterdam in its early days, a chaotic, vibrant trading post where Dutch merchants in their distinctive black clothing bargained alongside Lenape traders, French voyageurs, and enslaved Africans. The settlement was unlike anything Europe had ever seen. While other colonies were founded on religious ideals or royal decree, New Amsterdam was built profit. The Dutch West India Company cared little about the backgrounds of those who could make them money, creating an atmosphere of relative tolerance that would define New York's character forever. The most famous real estate transaction in history occurred in 1626, when Peter Minuit supposedly purchased Manhattan from the Lenape for 60 guilders worth of goods, often mischaracterized as $24 worth of beads. The reality was far more complex. The Lenape didn't view land as something that could be owned, and they likely believed they were granting usage rights, not transferring ownership. This cultural misunderstanding would have profound consequences, but it also established Manhattan as a place where different worlds collided and merged. Under Dutch rule, New Amsterdam became a remarkable experiment in diversity. 18 different languages were spoken on its streets. Jews fleeing persecution in Brazil found refuge here. Enslaved Africans, despite their bondage, maintained aspects of their cultural identity and even earned small wages. The city's famous tolerance wasn't born from enlightened idealism, but from practical necessity. Diversity was simply good for business. The Dutch era ended abruptly in 1664 when 4 English warships sailed into the harbor. Governor Peter Stuyvesant, known for his silver peg-leg and fierce temper, wanted to fight, but the Dutch colonists had no desire for bloodshed over a distant company's profits. Without firing a shot, the English took control and renamed the city New York in honor of the Duke of York. The future King, James II, under English rule, New York's growth accelerated dramatically. The city's position at the mouth of the Hudson River made it the natural gateway between the Atlantic Ocean and the vast interior of North America. Merchants built grand houses along the waterfront, their ships bringing in goods from across the globe: Chinese silk, Caribbean sugar, Virginia tobacco, and Pennsylvania grain. The city was becoming wealthy, but it was also becoming divided. By the 1760s, New York had developed a distinct character. It was more cosmopolitan than Boston, more commercially minded than Philadelphia, and more socially stratified than either. Wealthy merchants lived in elegant Georgian mansions, while laborers crowded into tenements near the docks. The city's taverns buzzed with political debate, and its coffeehouses served as informal stock exchanges where fortunes were made and lost on handshake agreements. The American Revolution tested New York's loyalties severely. The city's merchant elite had grown rich under British rule and were reluctant to rock the boat. But the working classes, burdened by taxes and impressed into naval service, increasingly supported independence. The Sons of Liberty met in secret, plotting resistance, while British sympathizers informed on their neighbors. The city became a microcosm of a nation dividing against itself. The war brought devastation to New York. British forces occupied the city for 7 years. From 1776 to 1783, the Great Fire of 1776 destroyed hundreds of buildings, leaving much of the West Side in ruins. Patriots fled, Loyalists crowded in, and the city's population swelled with refugees, soldiers, and camp followers. Disease ran rampant, and the prison ships anchored in the harbor became floating tombs where thousands of American prisoners died in horrific conditions. When the British finally departed in 1783, New York faced an uncertain future. The city lay partially in ruins, its economy shattered, its population depleted. But New Yorkers possessed something that would prove more valuable than gold: an unshakable belief in the power of commerce and an unmatched ability to reinvent themselves. The early decades of the new republic witnessed New York's transformation into America's undisputed commercial capital. The city's merchants were the first to recognize that the new nation's future lay in trade, not just with Europe, but with the expanding American frontier. They financed the construction of turnpikes, invested in inland navigation, and most importantly, championed the construction of the Erie Canal, completed in 1825. The Erie Canal was the engineering marvel of its age. This artificial river stretched 363 miles from Albany to Buffalo, connecting the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean via New York Harbor. The canal's impact was immediate and transformative. Goods that once took weeks to transport now moved in days. Western grain poured into New York's warehouses, while manufactured goods flowed west to growing frontier communities. The canal made New York not just a city, but the city. By 1850, New York handled more cargo than Boston, Philadelphia, and Baltimore combined. The city's population exploded from 60,000 in 1800 to over 500,000 by 80 and 50. Manhattan's shoreline bristled with masts. Its streets clogged with wagons, its warehouses packed with goods from around the world. This growth came at a human cost. As immigrants flooded into the city, first from Ireland and Germany, later from Italy, Eastern Europe, and beyond New York, struggled to house and employ them all, the infamous Five Points district became synonymous with poverty, crime, and despair. Families of 10 crowded into single rooms in buildings that rarely saw sunlight. Cholera outbreaks killed thousands, while political corruption allowed these conditions to persist. Yet even in its darkest corners, New York pulsed with opportunity and energy. P.T. Barnum's American Museum drew crowds with its curious exhibits and exotic performances. The Astor Place Opera House brought European culture to American audiences. Wall Street evolved from a simple marketplace into the financial nerve center of a growing nation. Central Park, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, provided a green refuge from urban chaos, proving that Americans could create beauty as well as wealth. The Civil War tested New York's commitment to the Union. The city's economic ties to the South ran deep. New York merchants financed Southern cotton plantations. New York ships carried Southern goods. New York banks held Southern debts. But when war came, New York rallied to the Union cause, sending more troops than any other city and helping to finance the war effort. The war also brought New York its darkest hour. In July 1863, anger over the military draft exploded into 4 days of rioting that left hundreds dead and whole neighborhoods in flames. The rioters, mostly Irish immigrants who couldn't afford to buy their way out of military service, targeted African Americans and abolitionists. Federal troops had to be rushed from the battlefield at Gettysburg to restore order. The riots revealed the deep ethnic and racial tensions that prosperity had papered over but not resolved. The decades following the Civil War marked New York's golden age of growth and transformation. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 made New York the eastern terminus of a transportation network spanning the continent. The opening of the Suez Canal that same year brought New York closer to Asian markets. Immigration reached unprecedented levels, with Ellis Island processing millions of newcomers who saw the Statue of Liberty as their first glimpse of American freedom. These immigrants transformed New York into a truly global city. Italian families brought their culinary traditions to Mulberry Street. Jewish refugees from Eastern European pogroms created a vibrant Yiddish culture on the Lower East Side. Chinese immigrants, despite facing severe discrimination, established thriving communities in Chinatown. Each group faced prejudice and hardship, but each also contributed to the city's incredible dynamism and creativity. The late 19th century saw New York reach skyward as never before. The invention of the safety elevator and steel frame construction made possible buildings of unprecedented height. The first skyscrapers rose like modern cathedrals, their facades adorned with elaborate stonework that rivaled the great buildings of Europe. The Brooklyn Bridge, completed in '83, spanned the East River like a giant harp, its Gothic towers inspiring poets and painters. By 1898, New York achieved political unity to match its economic dominance. The five boroughs Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island consolidated into a single city of 3.4 million people, making it the second largest city in the world after London. The new Greater New York possessed the resources and ambition to truly compete on the world stage. The 20th century opened with New York poised to become not just America's greatest city, but one of the world's great capitals. The city had overcome fires, riots, depressions, and wars. It had transformed from a small Dutch trading post into a metropolis that rivaled London and Paris in influence and prestige. Most importantly, it had developed a character that was uniquely American, diverse, dynamic, commercial, and endlessly capable of reinvention. Standing in Times Square today, surrounded by the lights and sounds of 8 million souls from every corner of the earth, it's hard to imagine that this same ground once knew only the footsteps of the Lenape and the whisper of wind through ancient trees. Yet that transformation from Mannahatta to Manhattan, from colonial outpost to global capital, represents one of the most remarkable urban stories ever told. New York City succeeded because it embraced what made it different. While other cities clung to old ways and familiar faces, New York welcomed the strange, the foreign, the ambitious, and the desperate. It built its fortune on the simple recognition that in diversity lay strength, that in change lay opportunity, and that in dreams lay the power to transform not just a city, but the world. This is how Manhattan Island, once home to Lenape villages and pristine forests, became New York City, the place where America learned to dream big, build tall, and never stop reaching for something greater than what came before. The city that began as Mannahatta, the island of many hills, had indeed become many things to many people, but above all, it remained what it had always been, a place where anything seemed possible.